What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here. So obviously I haven't been filming for a little while, haven't been doing any reviews or anything like that. So thought it'd be a good time to get back into it because I do have a little bit of free time, not much, but at least enough to where hopefully I can get some reviews done in the next few weeks. But that being said, we will start it back up with a movie that I saw last week, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So first of all, into my non-spoiler thoughts before we get into the spoilery stuff. And if you're a fan of the first two Guardians movies, you will probably enjoy this one. I know the reaction online is kind of mixed. Here's the thing, it's not going to be a movie that's for everybody. There are, not going to say there are no flaws in it, but I feel like there's one thing that really got me going with this movie and really got me interested in it in a way that a lot of the movies and shows that Marvel have put out recently did not. And that is, it felt like they, to borrow a line from the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, it looked like they gave a crap. You know, they actually went out there and tried to write a fun, entertaining, emotional, well thought out story. You know, with some issues here and there, you know, because of course you're still trying to tie into the past two movies as well as some other stuff that's happened in the MCU. So it's not like it's perfect, but of all of the stuff that I've seen more recently, it felt the most concise, it felt the most focused, and it really felt like it had more passion than a lot of this MCU stuff that I've seen. And that's why, for me personally, it's easily one of my favorites since Endgame. You know, I'd say No Way Home is probably the only other one that I feel like there was some passion behind it. But yeah, it didn't feel like it was trying to, you know, push some powerful message or be representative or, you know, try to build up for the next big MCU thing. It was a Guardian story. It was very personal. You know, it involves one of the members of the Guardians getting injured, and then they're having to try to save them, and that's basically kind of it. You're learning more about the villain who put them in this situation, and that's, you know, there's not any side stories that are building up toward future Marvel products. You're just focused here, and I honestly really prefer that. So my overall non-spoiler thoughts are, I would say go see it, and go see it in the theater as well, because it really is a fun spectacle to see on the big screen, and I feel like that's something, you know, there was a talk for a while that maybe theaters would go out of style because, oh, well, we have streaming services and we can watch these movies on our streaming and all that stuff. But honestly, there is something very special about seeing a lot of the effects and a lot of the passion that went into this on the big screen. Because honestly, I feel like the effects in this are a lot better than they have been for some of the recent MCU stuff. So this is definitely one that I would suggest going and seeing on the big screen. And don't think too hard about it. Obviously, I will talk a bit more about how my brain works in the spoiler stuff. But it is one that you can have some fun and sort of get involved and enjoy the characters as well. So yeah, overall, good film, one of the best since Endgame, and hopefully, you know, not the last of the good things to come out of Marvel, even though, you know, obviously James Gunn is no longer a part of Marvel and is going over to DC. I'm hoping that Marvel does take some of the stuff out of this film, some of the ideas, the passion, the fact that it was very focused and centered. I mean, even No Way Home, that was kind of something else. It was very focused on Spider-Man's problems, even though it did have Doctor Strange. It was all of those Spider-Man coming together in all of the past films. It felt very focused on kind of being a love letter to Spider-Man as a character. This felt kind of like a love letter and a send-off for the Guardians. So, yeah, very, very well put together movie. So, with all that being said, we will talk now about spoiler stuff. So, if you haven't seen it, you want to see it, don't stick around for my video. Come back later if you want to. I realize not a lot of people want to watch these videos that I'm making, but hey, for you, the few of you that do, I appreciate you. Okay, that's enough of a warning. So, on to the spoiler stuff. I am going to tackle this piece by piece because there are some aspects of the story that felt a little bit more pushed to the side as it went on, which is fine because they kept the focus really where it needed to be, which is Rocket and the High Evolutionaries. Like that's kind of the main focus here. The first one, which it was both the weakest but also one of the funniest things about the film, is Adam Warlock. Obviously, the joke has been made, and I've seen it several videos talking about the film, it does sort of feel like he was more of an afterthought. That they were like, oh crap, we teased him at the end of the second one. Well, we'll just put him in here as kind of a side joke, and the Sovereign were made by the High Evolutionary. Here's the thing about it that kind of bugs me a little bit. It would not have been very hard to make him more involved in the story. The fact that they made the Sovereign essentially creations of the High Evolutionary, and Adam Warlock is one of their creations, you could have easily tied it into, well, they send Adam Warlock to go get Rocket Raccoon. Okay, that makes sense. But he is a little younger. He hasn't been perfected. You could say that's why he's not like fully under their control. He is sort of thinking for himself type of thing. And then that moment, whenever they're on Counter Earth and the High Sovereign dies, and he basically saw her as a mother, that could be his turning point to help fight the High Evolutionary with the Guardians. Like, it did feel like that's something they could have easily tied into the story to give him, even though he wouldn't have been the main focus, even though Guardians of the Galaxy 2 suggested he would be, it would still give him enough of a point of being here outside of just he's a funny character. Because he is very funny, and Will Poulter played him really, really well. It's not the same Adam Warlock that I've heard about and that I saw in the Guardians of the Galaxy video game. But they even say, oh, well, we brought him out too early, so he's more like a child. And he played that kind of naive, child-like innocence very well. And several of his scenes did make me laugh. But on the whole of it, it did feel like he was more of an afterthought. It didn't feel like they had a point for him in the story, so they just sort of threw him in at times to sort of, oh yeah, we'll have him be the reason why this doesn't completely go to plan. So yeah, a little bit weak, but still a funny character, and one that I hope we see a bit more of going forward, because he was enjoyable to watch. As far as Peter and Gamora's story, one that I did kind of appreciate, because going in, obviously there was going to be that whole thing about what are they going to do with Peter and Gamora? Are they going to put them back together? How is this going to be handled? Because this is not the same Gamora. And I liked the fact that they didn't really just instantly put them back together. They didn't really even get together at the end of the film. It almost kind of felt like Peter was sort of letting go and saying, you know what, this isn't my Gamora. She's gone. My Gamora is gone. And that's something that I have to say, well done. Because most films would have done the whole, oh, well, she's not his Gamora, but she's still Gamora, so they're still going to end up together. But no, they really did a good job of showing this is not the same Gamora. She was taken out of time back when she was a little bit more hardened. She hadn't quite seen, I guess, some of the stuff that Thanos had done and hadn't really started to turn against him yet. She's not the same. She's not the same type of person. And honestly, even coming from a different universe, who knows what that universe went through that was different than ours. At the time, obviously, they were very similar because the TVA had still kept it all under control. But there could have been a few tiny things that didn't quite break that boundary of changing too much in the timeline that did make her slightly different than the Gamora that we had in our timeline. So there's a lot about that I feel like they did a good job of not just playing the same old, oh, well, it's still Peter and Gamora and they just always end up together no matter what, which is kind of what, Doctor Strange kind of played with a little bit. It's like, oh, well, no matter what, whatever universe you're in, you two would never work out. Like, that'll never happen. It's fate. It's not going to... I don't really... I don't know. I get it from a romance perspective, but I also appreciate whenever they flip that script a little bit, and that's what they did here. So I like how it ended. I feel like, Gamora has her own little thing that she can do now where she's with the Ravagers and that's her new home. Peter obviously going back to his home on Earth and finding out that he still had family there. It really summed up, I feel like, the moral of the film, which is, the idea of your past and how that affects you, and whether you're running from it or whether you're avoiding it. The past is still very important. It's part of who you are. It's a part of what defines you as a person. Now the question is, are you going to learn from your past, or are you going to let your past dictate your life? And I feel like they showed kind of a few different types of that story being handled, whether it's Gamora with a different past, whether it's Peter basically avoiding going back to his past, whether it was Rocket running from his past and everything that happened to him. There was a little bit of different sides of that story throughout, and I really appreciated that. As far as the other three sort of side Guardians in this, Nebula, Mantis, and Drax, all of them, they weren't focused on heavily, but they each had their own little individual character arcs in this. Again, kind of similar with Drax with the whole idea of focusing on the past. He was trying to, I guess, push that mantle of being the father figure because he lost his family and focus on being the destroyer. And I really like that scene at the end whenever I think it was Mantis was like, "You're not a destroyer, you're a father." I really appreciated that because it gave him a little bit more meaning, and he wasn't just the big bumbling idiot that I feel like ever since Guardian 2 they've sort of been playing upon. Like, he showed his softer side. He showed the depth to him whenever he bonded with these kids and allowed them to essentially be the thing that helped them in the end. But yeah, they gave him a little bit more depth. You know, Mantis, she was being shown as kind of like the enabler. You know, it kind of felt like her and Drax were just sort of brother and sister, and she just kept picking on him, and he was too dumb to understand. But they showed like she really does understand people on a deeper level, and she understands how to reach those people. And whenever she tamed the big wild, whatever, tentacle monsters, it allowed her to get out of that as well. And then Nebula, of course, she almost became sort of like the mother figure in the group, and she really had more of a focus. She showed her appreciation for a lot of the Guardians throughout the film, and that's something that obviously we hadn't gotten to see because she only recently joined them at the end of the second one, and then all the Avengers films happened, and now she's completely different and fits in with the group differently as well. So I appreciated how they tied her in with the group and really gave her some good heartfelt moments with everybody as well. So those three, you know, they weren't big parts of the story, but they were still meaningful parts of the story. Groot did get a little bit sidelined. Like, he didn't really have a whole lot to do throughout the film. He was more so like we got to see Groot sort of back in his original form. He is bigger. I don't know why that happened. I don't know why they made him much more of like a buff tree in this one, but he had some like new abilities that they got to show off and still had some good moments that makes him fun as a character. But yeah, overall he just didn't really have much. There was, in one video I watched, there was something posed that I do kind of like as a headcanon thing. I don't know if this has been confirmed, but of course at the end he has that, you know, "I love you guys." And it was kind of one that, like, in the theater that I watched it, there was kind of a few reactions of like laughing. Some people were like, "What?" Like, it was sort of like it's funny, but it's also kind of weird. Like, wait, now he can say words outside of it. I think what I liked about the theory I heard was with Gamora, we see throughout the film she just hears "I am Groot," and that's all she hears. And then at the end, whenever she truly bonds with a group and it feels like she actually forms a connection with Groot, that's when she starts to understand what he's saying. And so somebody suggested, like, maybe at the end we, the audience, were finally hearing what he's been saying the whole time. You know, he still said "I am Groot," but now we understand it because we formed that connection with them in the end. And I like that. That's a good headcanon for me. Again, I don't know if that's been confirmed by anybody, if that was what the idea was. But if so, I mean, it's a very sweet and meaningful note to end on. So, yeah, I hope that's why. I hope they confirm that in the end, because if so, then it's going to touch my heart a little bit more. But yeah, let's get on to, obviously, the more emotional side of things in this, and that is, of course, everything to do with Rocket and the High Evolutionary. First of all, from the High Evolutionary's point of view, from the villain's point of view in this, honestly, he's not the best villain in the MCU. He is one of the, in my opinion, most cruel villains, which in a sense does make him a really good villain. Because here's the thing, there's been a whole lot of talk about, you know, giving villains depth and giving them more of a point. You know, you've got your Maleficent movie, your Joker movie. You know, you got these movies that are giving the villains more depth and more sympathy, and more you can see where they're coming from. You know, even in some movies the villains are given a backstory where we get to see why they're doing what they're doing, and it can either make you feel bad for them or it can help you sympathize with them, so you kind of see where they're coming from even though they're going about it the wrong way. So there's been a lot of different types of that done throughout the years. I like the fact that we are starting to get a few more villains that are not sympathetic, like they are just evil. Because there are evil people in the world. There are a lot of people out there that just hate other people for no reason, or because they think they're better than them, or they think they deserve, in this case, he had a god complex. He saw himself as a god, and he could just create whatever he wanted, and if he didn't like it, well, he started over. And there are people out there like that. There are people out there, mostly higher up people who are in control of stuff. They see themselves as like, I'm so much better than everybody else around me. You can't even touch me. They exist. And we've not really gotten a villain like him for a little while. Even Thanos, who saw himself as like this powerful being who had the ability and had the know-how to solve problems. He wasn't doing it so much from I'm a creator and I deserve this. This is my birthright. It was more so he really thought this was the way to solve the problems. And, so many things had been done in the past that he thought were, didn't work, blah, 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 whatever. So it was kind of a god complex, but even then they made him sympathetic enough to where you really felt like he cared about what he was trying to do. In this case, the High Evolutionary, he didn't really care about his creations. He just wanted to be smart enough to get the job done, basically. He wanted to be the one that's in control of all of it and find these solutions, and being challenged is what sets off people like that. Seeing somebody who's more in control or more intelligent, more capable than solving problems than you, that sets off people with God complexes. So I've seen a lot of people talk about, him in multiple lights, he's just a screaming, raving lunatic, he's just evil, he's just blah, blah, blah. Honestly, it's what this story needed. And does that make the story a little predictable going forward? Yeah, a little bit. Because that is one thing I will say. This story was very predictable when it came to the villain, Rocket, everything to do with that. I called a lot of this going into it. There's a lot when you're watching. If you know how movies work and you see sort of where it's going, kind of the story they're building up, a lot of this film was focused on saving Rocket's life. So, of course, they're going to save his life in the end. And because if they didn't, then it would feel like this whole movie was kind of pointless. Trying to save his life and then, we failed. Oh, well, now you can just go kill the guy that did all this to him. Like, it's not quite as satisfying if he doesn't survive. So, of course, he's going to make it. It's not like another film where in the second movie you spend the entire time trying to save the main character's girlfriend's life, and then in the third film she just dies. Like, that makes that whole second movie feel pointless. If you don't know which film series I'm talking about, it's okay. Don't stress yourself too much about it. I'm not even going to tell you. Just there's a series out there that does that. Just so you know. The Hobbit did it too. Now that I'm thinking about it, in a way. Second movie saved a character, and third movie killed him off anyway. But whatever the case, the movie was focused on saving Rocket, so kind of predicted he was going to survive in the end. I even had the thought some part of the way through, like, probably going to have a scene where he's in the white place, that's like kind of heaven-like at the end, and I think everybody kind of knew that his little friends were probably not going to make it in the flashbacks. That's why every single time those scenes happened, I could feel like my throat start to close a little bit, and my heart was like, oh, they're not going to make it. But I even had the thought, I'm like, I wonder if he's going to end up in that place with them at the end, and then they're going to be like, no, it's not your time yet. Because it's been done so often, I was shocked that they actually did it, because I'm like, wow, that's really predictable. But of course, he's probably going to make it, more than likely, and then probably at the end he's going to get a chance to take down the High Evolutionary. I will say it was a little funny that they're like, no, we're not going to kill him because we're the freaking Guardians of the Galaxy. And then they just leave him to blow up on the ship. It's like the Batman thing, I don't have to save you, or something along those lines. But yeah, so it was a little predictable, but again, it had my attention because the villain was so evil. They did such a good job of making me hate him because, of course, I got my little Boston Terrier shirt on. Who doesn't hate people who abuse animals? How could you see somebody who's abusing animals and be like, you're a good person? Like, no, everybody hates people like that for the most part, except for other animal abusers. Like, if you're just cruel and unusually, like, experimenting on animals, you're most likely going to be hated by a large chunk of the population. So it was a very good setup for him to be such a despicable person, which led to a satisfying conclusion whenever Rocket kicked his ass along with the rest of the team. So, yeah, again, very predictable in that sense. I kind of figured there would be a point where Rocket would get to kick his ass and that we'd all cheer and shout and be like, yeah, get him! But it got me invested, and that's what a movie should do. Because obviously we've seen enough movies, you're probably going to be able to predict what's going to happen in the movie, because if you've seen enough, you've seen pretty much most stories. However, that doesn't mean that it can't be enjoyable in the process. The journey, the characters, all of that, as long as you've written them well enough, most people are not going to care if you can predict the movie from minute one, because they'll enjoy the experience of getting to see these characters that you've written and the story that you've put together come to a conclusion that was very satisfying. So I really appreciate the High Evolutionary for being that type of villain, and really, again, showing off that idea of a god complex done correctly. Beyond that, obviously talking about Rocket Raccoon now, yeah, his story was really emotional. Again, if you didn't know that the little friends were gonna not make it, I feel bad for you, because then that scene must have hit you a lot harder. But they did such a good job, though, of building all of that up, showing what he went through at a very young age. And I mean, it helps that they're all adorable little creatures. That kind of helps the story along and makes you feel even more for them. But they did a really good job of showing why he is the way he is. Because they I think it addressed it a couple times in the first two films, where he talked about all the things that happened to him, like vaguely, but not really in specifics. And you could kind of sympathize with it, but to actually see it, it really does give you a much more deeper connection with him, and kind of why he is kind of a jerk to everybody, because yeah, he was raised in a very vile and awful atmosphere, basically environment. There we go. So all in all, though, that whole backstory, I mean, it got to me. I cried. I mean, yeah, it hit hard. Especially, even though knew it was coming, the scene where his friends got killed was just, that definitely hurt, and I shed a few tears. I heard a couple sniffs happening around me. I saw my friend that I went with. I saw him doing this, so I'm just like, yep, we're all feeling it, because yeah, I mean, it is something to be said, and I think especially if you're somebody who's not like doesn't really fit in, feels a little bit like an outcast, feels a little bit kind of like a weirdo. I mean, the first song in the film, "I'm a Creep," kind of sets up for it as well. So if you're somebody who has ever felt like that as well, I feel like you could really make a connection with these characters, because they all are, I mean, they're all a little weird, but they're just normal. They look weird. You got a little otter with mechanical arms, the bunny with the thing over her face and like spider legs, the little walrus with the wheelchair attached to him or whatever. I mean, they're all odd and strange and look a little out of place. But if you're somebody who feels like that, that really hits home whenever you see them all making that bond, because it's typically those type of people that tend to form those friendships, because if you feel like an outcast, you can connect with other outcasts type of thing. So, yeah, that scene really hit hard, and then of course him going to the afterlife and seeing them one more time, that also hit hard. And even the scene where he finally finds the little raccoons, he's like, oh, I am a raccoon, like that also. It felt very emotional, because it's like, I don't know, it's very simple, it's kind of funny in a way, because he keeps saying, oh, I'm not a raccoon, I'm not a raccoon, and then he sees that he is. But I don't know, just the way that it all comes together in the end, it gives him a sense of identity finally. So yeah, it was very, very emotional and very well done. And again, it was done in a way that felt like it had passion. It felt very emotional, and it wasn't half-assed in any way. So I really appreciated everything they did with Rocket, with the High Evolutionary, their whole story, how they built it up, how it ended. It was really well done. So I think that's about it. Obviously, there are some other things that happened throughout the film that didn't stick in my head quite as much. I will say the music, once again, was phenomenal, because pretty much every Guardians movie has had a great soundtrack, because they're pulling some of these classic songs in. But yeah, when it first started off with "Creep" by Radiohead, I was like, oh, okay, this is this feels a little different. This is not your sort of '80s kind of high upbeat. This feels a little bit more '90s and mellow type of vibe to it. So, of course, I say that, and then that one hallway scene with BC Boys, that was just phenomenal. It's a great scene. I kind of want to see it again. So yeah, all in all, really good movie, but that's just my opinion. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on the film? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Marvel stuff, and I'll see you guys whenever I see you. Peace out.